August 18, 1590. A ship's boat pulls for the shore of a low green island on the coast of what is now North Carolina. In it rides a governor without a colony. John White has spent 3 years trying to get back to this beach, back to the 115 people he left here, among them his daughter, his son-in-law, and a granddaughter who was 9 days old when he sailed. She turns 3 years old today. The evening before, from the anchorage, the crew saw smoke rising through the trees. In the dark, they rowed toward it, sounded a trumpet call, and sang familiar English tunes across the water, and called out friendly, the way you call to countrymen. No one answered. Now White climbs the sandy bank in morning light. He finds fresh footprints. He finds no people. Where the houses stood there is a high wall of tree trunks, built like a fort, raised some time after he left. And on a tree at the brow of the bank, cut cleanly into the bark, 3 Roman letters, C-R-O. Inside the wall, on a post at the right side of the entrance, 5 feet from the ground, carved in fair capital letters, 1 whole word, Croatoan. The island is Roanoke, tucked between the barrier sands of the Outer Banks and the mainland shore of North Carolina. The people missing from it were the first English colony of families ever planted in the Americas. They had arrived in the summer of 1587, 20 years before Jamestown, 33 years before the Mayflower. 115 men, women, and children by the count that survives, led by an unusual choice of governor. John White was a painter. The watercolors he made on this coast are still the clearest window Europe ever opened on the native nations of the Atlantic seaboard, and they hang in the British Museum today. This is the colony America calls lost. Its story is told in classrooms and at campfires, on cable specials, and in half the ghost tours of the South, and for more than 4 centuries, it has come down to the same question. 115 people, 1 word on a post. Where did they go? England came to this coast late and hungry for a foothold. In 1584, Walter Raleigh held a royal patent for any land he could plant in the New World, and the captains he sent to scout reported back something close to Eden. Soil they called the most plentiful, sweet, and wholesome in all the world. Vines heavy with grapes at the very edge of the surf. A people, wrote Captain Arthur Barlow, most gentle, loving, and faithful. 2 men of those nations sailed to England with the scouts and back again. Man T.O. of the island of Croatoan, Wan Cheese of Roanoke itself. The next year came soldiers, more than 100 of them under Ralph Lane, a garrison meant to sit on the Spanish treasure route home. John White came along to paint, and the scientist Thomas Harriot to measure and to map. The pictures they made together are astonishing. The towns of Essikotan and Pomiuk, the fish weirs, the dances, the cooking fires. But a garrison cannot feed itself, and by spring the soldiers were living off corn grown by the very towns they painted. Relations curdled. In June of 1586, convinced an attack was coming, Lane struck first at night and killed Win G Na, the leading chief of the region, and the killing ended any welcome the English had on that shore. Days later, by pure chance, Francis Drake's fleet appeared over the horizon, and Lane's hungry garrison sailed home with him. A resupply ship arrived to find the fort empty. It left 15 men to hold the country and turned east. The 1587 voyage was a different kind of gamble. No garrison this time. Raleigh chartered a colony of households, farmers, craftsmen, a few gentlemen, 17 women, 11 children, with John White as governor and a city on the Chesapeake Bay as the destination. Among the passengers were White's own daughter Eleanor, her husband Ananias Dare, and their unborn child. The plan died at sea. The fleet's pilot, Simon Fernandez, put the colonists back on Roanoke instead, the one place already spoiled by Lane's war, and refused to carry them further. His reasons have been argued about ever since. Of Grenville's 15 men, the colonists found no one alive. 6 days after the landing, a colonist named George Howe was killed while wading for crabs, alone, unarmed, a mile from his neighbors. It was a hard start, but there were also good days that August. Manteo was baptized and named Lord of Roanoke, the first Protestant baptism recorded in the Americas. And on the 18th, Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter. Because she was the first English child born in Virginia, they christened her Virginia Dare. 9 days later, the colonists talked their governor into an errand none of them wanted. Someone with standing had to sail home and bring back supplies, and White was chosen. Before he left, they settled what he later called a secret token between them. If the colonists moved, they would carve their destination into a tree or a doorpost, and if they left in danger or distress, they would carve above the name a cross. White reached England as his country was bracing for invasion. The Spanish Armada was coming, and the Crown ordered seaworthy ships held for the fight. The relief of 115 people on a far shore could wait. In the spring of 1588, White scraped together 2 small pinnaces anyway, and French privateers ran them down, stripped them to the ballast, and sent them limping home. The war years ground on. It took until 1590 for White to find passage back across the Atlantic, and even then only as a passenger on a privateer more interested in Spanish prizes than in his colony. The crossing cost lives before he ever saw the beach. At the inlet, a landing boat overturned in heavy surf, and Captain Edward Spicer and 6 sailors drowned. Then came the smoke, the trumpet calls, and the songs in the dark, the footprints, the palisade. The houses had been taken down, not burned, not wrecked, taken apart. White's own sea chests, which he had buried 3 years before, had been dug up and picked over, his books torn, his framed maps rotten with rain, the armor he left almost eaten through with rust. And on the post, that one word, with no cross above it and no cross anywhere. The weather turned violent before the ships could work down the coast toward Croatoan. Cables snapped. Anchors were lost. The captains pointed the ships out to sea, and the search was over almost before it began. John White never crossed the Atlantic again. The last trace of him is a letter written from Ireland in 1593, committing the relief of his colonists, in his words, to the merciful help of the Almighty. He died without an answer. Somewhere behind him, in the records of the sea, 115 people slipped quietly out of history. What happened next is the strangest part of the story. Nothing. For generations, the colonists lived on only in Hakluyt's pages and sailors' talk. And then, 2.5 centuries after the landing boat turned away, America fell in love with them. In the 1830s, magazine writers took up the tale of the vanished settlers and gave the episode the name it has carried ever since, The Lost Colony. Virginia Dare, the baby born 9 days before the world lost sight of her, grew into a national heroine, and the storytellers gave her the life history the record never could. The most famous telling has her grown into a beautiful young woman, living among the tribes, transformed by a spurned sorcerer into a snow-white doe that haunted Roanoke Island and shot through the heart with a silver arrow at the very moment the spell was breaking. In 1901, the writer Sally Southall Cotton set the White Doe legend in an epic poem, and audiences across the country heard her read it. A North Carolina wine company put Virginia Dare's name and the legend on its label, and for a time hers was the best-known name in American wine. In 1937, on the sands of Roanoke Island itself, Paul Green's outdoor drama, The Lost Colony, opened at the Waterside Theater. And on the evening of Virginia Dare's 350th birthday, President Franklin Roosevelt sat in the audience. The colony was now the founding mystery of the United States. And that same autumn, it seemed to crack wide open. A Californian named Louis Hammond walked into Emory University carrying a 21-pound stone he said he had pulled from a riverbank 60 miles inland. Carved into one face, in weathered Elizabethan lettering, was a message. Ananias Dare and Virginia went hence unto heaven, 1591. It was signed with the initials of Eleanor White Dare, the governor's daughter, Virginia's mother. A professor named Haywood Pierce acquired the stone for Brainerd College and offered $500 for the next one. The stones came, dozens of them surfacing across Georgia and the Carolinas, spelling out a 17-year odyssey of flight, massacre, and survival, ending at Eleanor Dare's grave. Newspapers ran the story coast to coast. Scholars convened. Hollywood circled. By 1940, 400 years of silence looked like it was about to end, and America leaned in to listen. That is the legend of Roanoke, as America has told it for 200 years. The birthday landing is documented. The word on the post is documented. Where the rest of it came from is a different question, and it has a paper trail of its own. Set the legend down. Open the file. Start with the name itself, because the name is a confession. For roughly 250 years, the record does not call these colonists lost. The phrase belongs to the 1830s. The journalist and historian Andrew Lawler, who spent years tracing this story for his book The Secret Token, found no mention of Virginia Dare in print between her baptism record and 1834. The lost colony, as a phrase and as a national obsession, was born in the magazine culture of that decade, a quarter of a millennium after the events, from writers like Eliza Lanesford Cushing, who needed a romance and found one. The White Doe was never a native legend at all, so far as anyone can document. It enters the record through 19th century literary hands, and Cotton's 1901 epic, the version everyone remembers, was tied from the start to selling Scupper Nong wine. Lawler's history is blunt about what fueled the cult. Virginia Dare was pressed into service as an emblem of white innocence on a continent that was busy justifying what it did to everyone else, and some of her loudest devotees said so out loud. Then there are the Stones. In April 1941, the Saturday Evening Post published an investigation by the reporter Boyden Sparks. Louis Hammond, the man who produced the first stone, had vanished. No trace of the wife he described, no trace of his car, no record he existed under that name. Nearly every stone after the first traced back to one man, Bill E. B. Hart, a Georgia stonecutter with a sideline in fake Indian relics, who kept finding new stones whenever the reward money slowed. Scholars who re-examined the inscriptions found spellings and words no Elizabethan would have used. Braynor boxed the collection and put it away. One honest complication survives the wreck. The first stone, the Chirwan River Stone, never traced to E. B. Hart, and it has never been conclusively proven a fake. It sits at Braynor to this day, and specialists still argue about it. Everything else in the 17-year saga of Eleanor Dare fell. Now go back to the beach and read the page the way the man who wrote it did. The word on the post was never a cipher. Croatoan was an address. It was the island 50 miles south where Manteo was born, home of the one nation on that coast still friendly to the English after Lane's War. White knew the agreement because he had made it. A carved name meant we have moved, and here is where. A cross meant trouble. There was no cross. White wrote down exactly what he felt on finding the carving, and the sentence reads strangely against everything the legend became. He wrote that he greatly joyed to have safely found a certain token of their safe being at Croatoan. The discoverer of the most famous mystery in American history believed on the evidence in front of him that there was no mystery at all. He also knew where else to look. The colonists had told him in 1587 that they meant to move 50 miles into the mainland, and the phrase made it into his account. What failed was never the message. What failed was the follow-through. A storm took the anchors. The privateer captains had prizes to chase. The season was closing, and the one man who cared had no ship of his own. The search that the legend imagines, the frantic combing of the coast, simply never happened, and the timing of the whole affair was more cruel than anyone on that beach could know. In 1998, scientists reconstructed 800 years of regional climate from the growth rings of ancient cypress trees and published the result in Science. The 3 years the colonists spent on that coast without resupply, 1587 to 1589, were the driest stretch in the entire 800-year record. Whatever they did in the worst drought their world had seen in living memory, with a war behind them and allies 50 miles away in 2 directions. So the file says, follow the 2 arrows. People eventually did, and both directions gave something back. The first witness came early. In 1709, the explorer John Lawson spent time with the Hatteras Indians, the descendants of Manteo's people, living on the very island the post had named. He wrote down what they told him. Several of their ancestors, they said, were white people who could talk in a book, as he did. And Lawson added his own observation that gray eyes were found frequently among them, and among no other Indians he knew. 3 centuries later, the digging started. On Hatteras, a local historian named Scott Dawson and the British archaeologist Mark Horton have been excavating since 2009, and beneath layers dated to the late 1500s and early 1600s, they have turned up things a trading party does not leave behind. A rapier hilt, part of a writing slate with its lead pencil, bar iron, and Thousands of flakes of hammer scale, the microscopic spray, a blacksmith's hammer knocks off hot iron. Trade can carry a sword to an island. It cannot carry a working forge. Someone with English iron and English training was living and smithing on Croatoan, right where the post said to look. This spring, at a research center in Wan Cheese, the team presented new isotope and animal bone work arguing the same direction. English hands and native hands feeding one community. The other arrow points inland. In 2012, researchers asked the British Museum to put John White's own map of this coast on a light table because of a small paper patch at the head of Al Bermal Sound. Under the patch, hidden for 4 centuries, was the symbol of a fort drawn at the junction of the Chu Wan and Roanoke rivers, almost exactly 50 miles into the mainland. Archaeologists from the First Colony Foundation have since pulled Elizabethan pottery from 2 sites near that spot on Salmon Creek in Bertie County. Borderware kitchen pottery and pieces of provisioning jars, the ordinary dishes of ordinary English households, in ground where no English household was supposed to exist for another generation. Weigh it the way the file demands, in 3 separate piles. First, the documented record. The colonists left a message in a working system, named a destination, and marked no distress. That much has been solid for 400 years, and it was never mysterious to the man it was left for. Second, the archaeology. It is strong, and getting stronger, and it is not yet proof. European objects can move along trade routes without a single European moving with them. Mark Horton himself concedes that the dating on artifacts like these cannot cleanly separate one generation from the next, and no excavation on either arrow has yet produced the direct evidence that would close the case. A colonist's grave, a verified English burial, DNA carried down a Hatteras family line. Third, the dark endings. Reports reached Jamestown decades later, and secondhand, the colonists living far to the north had been killed on the orders of the Powhatan leadership before 1607. Historians have gone back and forth on those accounts for a century, and no archaeology has ever backed them. They remain stories about the colonists from a colony with its own reasons for telling them. The piles are not the same height. Nothing in the record requires a catastrophe. Almost everything in the record is consistent with a town that did what its own doorpost said it did. So, the verdict held open where the evidence holds it open. The record does not support a vanishing. No abduction, no annihilation, no 17-year stone diary, nothing that needs 115 people to dissolve into sea air. What the record does support is quieter and better documented. A planned move announced on a doorpost. The worst drought in 8 centuries. English forge waste under the sand of the island the post named. Grey eyes and a family story on Hatteras in 1709 in communities that have claimed the colonists among their ancestors ever since. And a governor who read the word Croatoan and called it, in his own hand, a token of their safe being. White took the carving as good news. It took America 2.5 centuries to decide his good news was a mystery, and it has spent nearly 2 more selling the mystery back to itself. The colonists of Roanoke left a forwarding address. Their story only became a riddle when it found tellers who needed one.